The golden lights of the Christmas dinner gleamed across the room, illuminating smiling faces, ribbons and silver bells, and the tree studded with stars. Beneath it lay countless gifts, wrapped in paper printed with snowflakes and reindeer, tied with satin bows. Children screamed and laughed, each pouncing on their own share. My daughter Anya stood in the shadow of that tree. She didn't cry. She had already learned not to cry. She simply stood there, still and quiet, her little hands clasped in front of her, her eyes fixed unblinkingly on the children tearing open their presents. On her face was an empty, heartbreaking calm, a calm like a thin sheet of ice, beneath which churned things she dared not bring to the surface. At that moment, I stood at the other end of the table, gripping a wine glass so hard my knuckles went white, my nails nearly digging into my palm. I heard my own heartbeat pounding against my eardrums, one thud after another, like a hammer against my chest. I watched my mother-in-law, Evelyn, smiling as she handed the very last box, the largest one, tied with a gold ribbon, to the neighbor's child, a kid who wasn't even a Carter relative, just someone Evelyn had met twice at a community event. And Anya, her granddaughter. No, in Evelyn's eyes, Anya had never been a granddaughter, received nothing. My husband Ethan stood beside me. He took my hand. His palm was burning hot, his fingers trembling slightly. I knew he had seen it too. But he said nothing, because in this house, some words, once spoken, would overturn the entire table. But I had had enough. My name is Leah Carter. I'm 34, a third-grade teacher in the small town of White Pine, Minnesota. 5 years ago, I married Ethan Carter. Anya was 4 then, brown-haired, round-cheeked, with 2 little dimples when she smiled, like a chestnut warmed by the sun. Her biological father had signed away his parental rights before she could even walk, vanishing from our lives without a trace. For the first 2 years, it was just Anya and me. I graded papers late into the night while she slept on a cushion by my feet, wrapped in a little blanket, breathing soft and light as a kitten. I thought it would be just the 2 of us forever. Then Ethan appeared. He came to fix our ancient heating system, his black work boots thudding on the entryway floor, carrying a toolbox, broad-shouldered and steady. His voice was low and rumbling, as if it came straight from his chest. He spent 2 hours crouched in the utility closet, tightening screws and replacing parts. When he came out, sweat beaded on his forehead, and his first words to me were, "Your pipes were clogged with dust for way too long." I cleared them out while I was at it. His second words were to Anya, who was peeking out from behind my leg, "This little one looks just like you." On our 3rd date, he didn't take me to a restaurant or a movie. He showed up with a bag of blankets and pillows, and he and Anya spent the entire evening building a castle on the living room floor, cushions for walls, a clothes rack for the roof, blankets draped down as curtains. I stood in the kitchen making hot cocoa, watching through the doorway as the 2 of them lay on the floor, heads together, discussing whether the tower should have a window. Anya giggled, and Ethan gently rubbed the crown of her head with his palm. At that moment, gripping the ladle, something settled in my heart. I knew, clearly, that this man understood. To love him meant to love my daughter without reservation, no conditions, no, "we'll see later," no distinction whatsoever. We married a year later. Ethan never used the word stepdaughter. Whether in private or in public, he introduced Anya with just 3 words, "my daughter." When Anya ran a fever at age 7, he took 3 days off work, staying by her bedside, wiping her forehead with cool cloths, waking every 2 hours through the night to check her temperature, his eyes ringed with exhaustion but refusing to sleep. His love for Anya was open, solid, and weighty, like the sturdiest wrench in his toolbox, real and genuine, without a hint of pretense. I once naively believed that such love could shield us from all prejudice. But I underestimated how stubborn some people could be. The Carter family had lived in White Pine for 3 generations. Evelyn Carter, my mother-in-law, was its matriarch. Above her living room fireplace hung an elaborately framed family tree, dark walnut, gold-threaded borders, every branch meticulously labeled with birth and death years, towns of residence, battles fought, marriages contracted. Evelyn treated that chart like a Bible, pulling it out at every gathering to lecture new in-laws or younger relatives, her finger tracing the lines slowly, her tone solemn and ritualistic. At first I thought it was a charming family pride. But over time, I began to understand, in her mind, that chart measured nothing about who was kind or who contributed to the family. It measured only one thing: blood. Those connected to the chart were family, those outside it could only ever be guests. And my daughter Anya, from the very first day she set foot in that house, was placed outside those lines. Evelyn's cruelty never erupted in loud arguments, that would have been too coarse. She was a dignified woman, and her malice was always wrapped in impeccable politeness, arms tight around other grandchildren, cheek pressed to theirs, murmuring, "My sweetheart." When it came to Anya, only a mechanical pat on the shoulder, brief as brushing off dust. Under the Christmas tree, every gift box bore a name, neatly written, every name except Anya. When passing out sweets, the other children got chocolate chip cookies from the top layer. Anya was, coincidentally, left with the plain oat ones at the bottom. At Thanksgiving when Anya was 7, she drew a card, a big tree with 4 people holding hands, colored in wax crayons. She mustered her courage and handed it to Evelyn, who took it, bent her mouth into a perfectly measured smile, said, "Not bad," and slipped it into a drawer. That card never saw the light again. That same evening, Anya watched Evelyn stick her cousin's scribbled mess of colors onto the refrigerator with great ceremony, photograph it, and post it to the family group chat with the caption, "My big grandson's little masterpiece, a future artist in the making." 2 Christmases ago, Anya was 7 and still hadn't learned to hide her longing. She saw the mountain of gifts under the tree and cautiously reached for one, a box tied with an emerald green ribbon, surprisingly heavy. Evelyn came over, her smile gentle and proper, smoothly took the box from her hands, bent down, and said in a voice soft as velvet yet each word coated with fine sandpaper, "Sweetheart, these presents are for Grandma's real grandchildren, only the children who share our family blood can take them." Real grandchildren. Family blood. Anya pulled her hand back, stepped half a pace away, the bewilderment on her face lasting only 2 or 3 seconds before it was replaced by a too-early-learned understanding. She nodded and retreated to her little stool in the corner. Ethan and I both heard those words. And Anya remembered them. For a long time, I lied to myself, telling myself Anya was too young to notice those subtle slights. It was the cowardliest excuse a parent can make, not wanting to confront, not daring to break the peace, so pretending the child didn't see. But children are far more perceptive than we imagine. They are like high-precision radar, constantly scanning everyone around them, who receives warmth, who gets only indifference, who is held tight, who is merely patted on the shoulder. Anya had been watching and swallowing all of it long before I admitted it to myself. She just didn't speak. She covered her hurt with a composure beyond her years, like thin snow over frozen ground, smooth and white on top, hard and cold beneath. The turning point came this spring, on a Tuesday after school. That day, White Pine was drenched in a fine spring rain, the car windows fogged. Anya was unusually quiet, no chatter about school, no singing along to the children's songs on the radio, no counting mailboxes out the window. She sat silently against the backseat glass, like a toy whose switch had been turned off. I stopped at a red light and turned to look at her. "Anya." She was silent for a few seconds, then spoke, her voice soft and flat, as if afraid to disturb something. "Mom." "Yes." "Why doesn't Grandma Evelyn like me?" The steering wheel jerked in my hands, the tires scraping the curb with a harsh screech. I steadied the car, my heart pounding in my throat. In the rearview mirror, Anya still had her face against the window, a strand of brown hair sticking to her temple, her eyes fixed on the trees rushing past, her expression so calm it was unsettling. "Sweetheart." My voice caught. "Why would you think that?" She slowly turned to face me. Her eyes were so clear that you could see all the confusion and hurt stored in them. "I never get any presents," she said, her tone still that careful, muted flatness. "Ronnie's Easter egg was bigger than mine. Grandma hugs Joanna for so long, but she only hugs me for a second. And..." She paused, looking down to twist a loose thread on her school skirt. "Everyone in the family has a nickname. Jojo, Lolo, Sweetie Pie, everyone except me. Grandma calls me that child." I heard her. She was quiet again for a moment, then whispered, "Did I do something wrong? I've thought about it so much, but I can't remember." I jerked the wheel and pulled into a gas station, mumbling, "Mommy needs to get gas." I shoved open the door and ran into the drizzling rain, around to the side of the station, my back to the car. I bent over, pressing my palm hard against my mouth. Tears hit the concrete, mingling with the rain, indistinguishable. My daughter, 9 years old, praised by her teacher as the most helpful, who helps new kids find their classrooms, who shares her snacks with the neighbor's dog, had done nothing wrong. Her only fault was that she didn't carry Carter blood. And yet she sat in the backseat, replaying every detail, chewing over every rejection, and had reached the only conclusion she could: I am the problem. Something is wrong with me. I failed a test that never even existed. There is no sharper pain than watching your child mistake someone else's malice for a flaw in herself. That evening, I didn't cry out loud. I waited until Anya fell asleep, her breathing shallow, her nose twitching, one hand clutching the corner of her blanket, then went to the bedroom, closed the door, and looked at Ethan. "We need to talk." Ethan sat up, the bedside lamp casting a warm yellow glow on his face. I told him everything Anya had said in the car, word for word. When I finished, he was silent for a long time. He sat on the edge of the bed, hands on his knees, back hunched, head low, the lamp deepening the shadows of his brow. Then, slowly, he laid his palm flat on the sheet, fingers slightly whitening at the knuckles. "She is my daughter," he said, his voice low, heavy as if rising from deep underground. "I don't care whose blood runs in her veins. She is my child. And I will not let my mother do this to her anymore." I looked at his profile, my throat tight. I wanted to tell him how many ways I'd tried, hints, jokes, even gentle arguments. But every time Evelyn's impenetrable grace had deflected me, she always smiled, always said, "You're overthinking," always dressed her discrimination as unintentional. I'd swallowed it all, told myself family harmony mattered most, that I couldn't tear us apart. I'd grown used to enduring, to burying grievances, to patching wounds with silence. Ethan looked up, something very heavy behind his eyes. He held my gaze for a long moment, then took my hand, his thumb slowly stroking my knuckles. "Leah," he said, "all that enduring you've done, it wasn't to protect her. You were afraid." He paused. "So often, that false peace itself is the sharpest blade against her." The dam in my eyes broke, a tear fell onto his hand. I knew he was right. For years I had avoided confrontation, avoided facing Evelyn, avoided laying everything bare. I told myself it was to keep the family whole, but really it was just cowardice. I didn't want to be the daughter-in-law who overturned the table, the troublesome woman who made the whole family stare. So I let my 9-year-old daughter bear those cold shoulders alone, silently, for all those years. Anya's soft, "Did I do something wrong?" was like a needle, piercing the tenderest part of my heart. I couldn't let her carry it alone anymore. Ethan rose, walked to the window, his back to me, the outline of his shoulder blades taut under his pajama shirt. "Before Christmas," he said, "I'm going to speak to my mother. And set things straight." The spring rain had stopped, moonlight spilled through gaps in the clouds, silver across the damp lawn. I watched Ethan's back, my heart churning with guilt, anger, heartache, and a deep, steady resolve. I knew Evelyn wouldn't yield easily, knew that conversation would fracture the Carter family dinner table. But I didn't care anymore. My daughter had sat in the corner for too many years. Beneath that Christmas tree, piled high with presents, none had her name. But this year would be different. This year, even if I had to overturn the whole table, I would make sure she knew, she was never, ever, the unchosen one. What I didn't know was that 3 days later, Ethan went alone to his mother's house. He sat in the living room with that family tree on the wall for an hour. When he came back, he looked as if something had been drained out of him, his face was pale, and he sat at the kitchen table for a long while without speaking. I set a glass of warm water by his hand and asked how it went. He looked up, his lips parted as if to speak, then he swallowed the words back down. That night, he didn't tell me. He only walked into Anya's room, sat by her bed for a long time, and gently touched her sleeping forehead. It wasn't until Christmas dinner itself that the truth, contained in that slim envelope, was ripped open in front of everyone. The dining room was warm as a furnace, fire crackling in the hearth, silver candlesticks casting golden light across the room. The air was thick with roast turkey and mulled cider, guests mingling with glasses in hand, laughter and the clink of china mingling in a cheerful din. Beneath the Christmas tree, torn wrapping paper lay scattered across the carpet like a mosaic of bright petals. My daughter Anya still sat on that low stool in the corner, knees together, hands folded in her lap. Before her, nothing. My heart ached, a dull and repeated pressure. Ethan stood beside me, half shielding me with his body, his breath controlled but strained. I could feel every muscle tightening, gathering strength. Evelyn moved through the crowd with a silver tray, her velvet gown trailing, her smile bright and poised, a queen surveying her domain. As she passed Anya, her gaze didn't pause, as if that corner was merely a piece of irrelevant furniture. Then Ethan moved. He released my hand and walked to the center of the room. He wore that charcoal wool suit, the one Anya had bought him last year with months of saved allowance, $3 at a time, over half a year. The little girl had spent an entire afternoon in the store, touching fabrics, comparing prices, her eyes shining like stars when she finally carried the box home. When Ethan put it on in front of her, he spun her around, telling her it was the best suit he'd ever worn. Now, wearing it, he stood straight, walking steadily to the gift-strewn carpet before the tree. He turned to face the assembly. Firelight from the hearth outlined his tall figure in gold, and Anya's small form in the corner fell within the shadow of his silhouette. He cleared his throat. "Everyone," Ethan said, his voice moderate but with an odd penetrating force that cut through the chatter like shears through silk, "I have something to announce." Heads turned. Evelyn's hand paused on the tray, her brow twitching almost imperceptibly. At the end of the table, Ethan's older brother Andrew set down his glass with a puzzled frown. His wife Martha drew her shawl tighter and leaned in. Even the children on the floor stopped their play, looking up. Ethan drew an envelope from his inner pocket. Plain cream paper, no return address, no postmark, only a dark blue wax seal at the flap, stamped with a mark that was hard to make out but seemed to be a bird, an eagle, talons gripping an open book. The room fell so quiet that the crackling fire seemed amplified. "For years," Ethan said, looking down at the envelope, his voice still steady, though I could hear the frayed tension underneath, "there's been one thing in this family that's never been properly addressed." He raised his gaze from the envelope, over everyone's heads, until it met Evelyn's. Her smile still clung to her lips, but its edge had stiffened. "Mom," Ethan said, "that family tree on your living room wall, how many years has it been up?" Evelyn set down her tray, her movements slow and deliberate, as if buying time. "Your grandfather's time. It's been 30 years for me," she said, her tone mild, her voice lifting at the end with forced lightness. "Why the sudden question?" Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he turned his gaze to the corner where Anya sat today. The little girl looked up at him, her brown eyes glistening in the firelight like amber dipped in water. Her lips parted as if to say, "Daddy," but she seemed uncertain if she should. Ethan reached out his hand. "Anya. Come here." Anya hesitated, then slipped off the stool and ran across the carpet, straight into Ethan's arms. He crouched down, one arm around her shoulders, pulling her close against him. My throat tightened at the sight, her small body nestled in the broad curve of his arm, like a young sapling finally leaning against a great tree. He bent his head and kissed her crown, then straightened, facing the now wide-eyed assembly. "All these years," he said, "I've never brought this up publicly. Because I never thought it needed to be a public thing. My daughter Anya, from the day I met her, was my daughter. Whose blood runs in her veins has never mattered to me." He paused, and the taut chord in his voice finally showed a hairline crack. "But where I was wrong was thinking that if I didn't bring it up, others wouldn't use it to define her." Evelyn's smile vanished. "Ethan," she said, her voice dropping into the stern authority of an elder, "this is a conversation for private." "No," Ethan replied calmly. "We'll have it here." He lifted the envelope so that everyone could see the eagle seal. "This envelope contains documents I obtained from the Minnesota State Archives. I should have looked into this long ago, but I never thought it necessary. Until 3 months ago, when Anya asked me, crying in the car, why her grandmother didn't like her. Then I realized, what I had dismissed as unnecessary was paid for with my daughter's tears." His voice began to shake. "Mom, you said Anya doesn't have Carter blood, so she's not a real grandchild, so she doesn't deserve presents, doesn't deserve hugs, doesn't deserve a nickname, doesn't deserve a seat at our family table." He forced each word out, as if tearing them from his chest. "But have you ever actually confirmed what blood runs in her veins?" Evelyn went pale, stepping back, her hand grabbing the edge of the table. "What are you saying?" Her voice rose, sharp. Her father did sign away his rights," Ethan interrupted. "The man who did that vanished before Anya could walk, and I've seen the relinquishment papers from Leah. But Mom, you, and everyone in this family, have only focused on the father gave up. You never once asked, who was that father?" A murmur rippled through the room. Andrew frowned deeply, Martha covered her mouth. A few older relatives whispered, the low hum like distant bees. Anya leaned against Ethan's leg, her head tilted. She didn't fully understand the big words, but she felt the unusual weight in his voice, like a volcano long dormant finally beginning to rumble. Ethan broke the wax seal with his thumb and pulled out a neatly folded sheet of paper, its edges curling slightly in the candlelight. He looked at it, took a deep breath. "Anya's biological father," he said, his voice rough, each step like treading on thin ice, "the one who signed the relinquishment." He filled in his own name and information on the form. He raised his eyes, scanning across the room until they locked on Evelyn. "Anya's biological father is Thomas Carter." 3 words, like nails driven into wood. The air in the room froze. For 2 long seconds, no one moved, no one breathed, even the fire seemed paused. Then someone's glass clattered to the marble floor, shattering, amber liquid spreading across the carpet. Evelyn's face drained of all color. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. Her veined hands gripped the table edge, her knuckles whitening to purple. She swayed like a figure whose support had been pulled away. Thomas Carter. That name was a forbidden taboo in the Carter family. Thomas was Evelyn's youngest brother, 11 years her junior, a branch on the family tree that had been struck through with black ink 25 years ago. At 23, he had been imprisoned for financial fraud, sentenced to 5 years. After release, he left Minnesota and was never heard from again. Evelyn herself had crossed out his name, blacking out his entire line with a permanent marker, as if erasing a mistake. In the Carter household, Thomas was a stone pressed on everyone's tongue. Speaking it was to court the matriarch's wrath. Now Ethan stood in the candlelight, dragging that stone out from beneath every tongue and dropping it on the table. "You're lying," Evelyn finally choked out, shrill and trembling, like nails on glass. "Impossible. Thomas, Anya is only 9, he went to prison 25 years ago." "He had medical leave during his sentence," Ethan said, his voice dropping, cold and hard. "In his 5th year, he had gallbladder surgery and was transferred to Minnesota State Hospital, where he stayed for 4 months. During those months, he met Leah's mother, Anya's grandmother, who was volunteering in the wards. She became pregnant, but Thomas left the state as soon as he was released and never returned. Anya's grandmother kept this secret for over a decade. She never even told Leah, because she was afraid her daughter would be burdened with the label of a convict's child." He turned to look at me. My mind was reeling, blood pounding in my ears. Where am I? What is he saying? Anya. Anya's grandmother, my mother. My mother had died 5 years ago. Lung cancer, discovered too late. I'd spent the last 3 months at her bedside, her body shriveled to a skeletal frame, barely enough breath to speak. But she had never told me. She had taken that secret about Thomas Carter to her grave, not a word to me. Why didn't she tell me? My mouth opened, but my throat was sealed. Ethan stepped over and placed the document in my hands. The paper held his warmth, dense type swam before my eyes, words both familiar and strange. But at the top, clearly printed, Subject A, Leah Carter, and Subject B, Anya, maternal DNA match 99.99%, Subject C, Thomas Carter, DNA sample retained from military service records, and Subject B, Anya, paternal DNA match 99.97%. I looked up, through blurring tears, past the people, to the family tree above the fireplace. Dark walnut, gold thread. Thomas Carter's name had once been there, then blacked over. And now, below that black line, on the chain of descent, a space lay empty, just large enough for 2 words. Anya. So, Ethan turned, now facing the room of relatives whose expressions had shifted from shock to numbness to dread, his voice like red-hot iron quenched in water, hissing with anguish and cold fury. All these years, this child who was excluded, who was hurt again and again with a real grandchild, the blood in her veins is exactly the same as every single one of you. He bent and gently ruffled Anya's hair. The little girl looked up. She didn't follow all the complicated words, DNA, medical files, matching percentages, but she understood his last sentence. Her lips moved, and in a tiny voice meant only for those near her, she asked, "Daddy, am I the same as them?" Ethan crouched to her eye level. His eyes were red. "Yes," he said hoarsely. "You've always been the same. Even better." Anya blinked. In her amber eyes, something had begun to shift, like, beneath the ice, a current of warmth finally stirring. Evelyn collapsed into the armchair behind her. Martha rushed to help her, but Evelyn shook her off. The old woman's chest heaved violently, her lips trembling, but no coherent words came. Andrew stood up, his face iron grey as he glared at Ethan. "Where did you get all this? You went digging into Thomas's past." "You." "I requested the files," Ethan said, meeting his brother's gaze evenly. "I checked the hospital volunteer rolls and treatment records from that year. I found Thomas's DNA sample from his military service. He served 9 months. Everything legal, everything traceable." "Andrew, you ask me why I did this." He let out a bitter, cold laugh. "I shouldn't have had to do any of this. It shouldn't have mattered whose daughter Anya was. But you, this family, forced me to dig all this up just so my daughter could get what any ordinary child is born with. And you're asking if I'm the one to blame?" Andrew fell silent, stepping back, his fists clenching and unclenching at his sides. The rest of the room, dozens of people stared, mute. The younger children had been ushered into another room by the adults, only a few older ones peeked around corners. All laughter, all clinking glasses had stopped, only the crackling fire and Evelyn's ragged breathing remained. I stood still, gripping the document, its edges crumpled under my fingers. I was still absorbing the news. Anya's biological father was Thomas Carter, and Thomas Carter had been my mother's brief lover, and my mother took that secret to the grave. Was she afraid I would reject her? Afraid I couldn't bear knowing my child carried a convict's blood? Or did she simply think that man was unworthy of being a father, so erasing him completely was the cleanest way? I didn't know the answer. I would never have the chance to ask her. But one thing I knew, the child standing here now, red-eyed, clutching Ethan's coat, watched by everyone, no matter who her biological father was, she was my daughter. From her first cry at birth, from the day Ethan lifted her to build a castle, from now, and forever. Anya tugged my sleeve. "Mom," she whispered, with the clear, innocent confusion of a 9-year-old, "Grandma." "Grandma Evelyn, is she sad now?" I crouched to her level. Her eyes were wet, like a lake after a light rain. She didn't look triumphant, or vengeful, or relieved. She looked at the old woman slumped in the chair, pale and trembling, and asked with a child's natural, tender empathy, "She's sad, should I comfort her?" My heart ached and burned at once. "Anya," I said, taking her small hand, rubbing my thumb across her warm palm, "you don't need to worry about her right now. Just think about yourself. You are not a child who did anything wrong. You never did anything wrong. Remember that." Anya tilted her head, as if weighing those words, then nodded solemnly. The ice that had laid over her eyes for years finally cracked just a little, and light slipped through. The Christmas dinner ended in an odd, fractured silence. Guests trickled out, hurried, coats thrown on crooked, farewells cut short. Servants cleaned up the spilled wine and broken china, a maid swept the stained carpet fragments into a bin. Martha helped Evelyn upstairs. As she passed me, our eyes met for a moment. I saw in hers the wreckage of a faith overturned, empty, grey, drained even of anger. She said nothing. Supported, almost dragged, she vanished up the stairs. Ethan stood at the front door, sending off the relatives one by one, his face tired and hard. He had thrown a bomb into the placid pond of the Carter family, stirring up mud, rotten roots, and buried truths. He had lost weight, the dark circles under his eyes told of many sleepless nights, a stubble shadowed his jaw. I went to him, wrapped my arms around his waist from behind, and pressed my cheek to the wool of his suit. "You've worked so hard," I murmured. His hand came up to cover mine, palm warm, as always, outwardly quiet, inwardly burning. "Leah," he said, his voice rough. "I meant to tell you earlier. I wanted to wait until I had the final results, so you wouldn't worry. But then," he paused, "at the dinner, seeing Anya there with everyone else holding gifts while she had nothing, I couldn't hold it in anymore." "It's okay," I said, feeling his warmth through the fabric. "You couldn't hold it in, and that was right. You've kept it in for too long, it was time for you to say it." Anya came running over, tugging at Ethan's pants leg. He turned, scooped her up onto his shoulders. She laughed, gripping his hair like reins. Only the three of us remained in the room, the fire dying to embers, soft orange light throwing our three shadows against the wall, tall and short, together. In the days that followed, it was like a frozen lake with a hole broken through. Cold air rushed in from the crack, but warm currents also began to rise from below. Evelyn was ill for 3 days. The family doctor came, said her blood pressure had spiked from shock and she needed rest. Martha and Andrew took turns tending her. On the 3rd evening, I brought a pot of homemade chicken soup to her bedroom door. I hesitated before knocking. Was I there to confront? Reconcile? Or just out of the politeness expected of a daughter-in-law? Ultimately I knocked, because as we left, Anya had clutched my finger and said, "Mom, the last time Grandma coughed, there was no soup on her table." I carried the soup in. Evelyn lay propped against her pillows, on the nightstand, her reading glasses and an open magazine. When she saw me, her eyelids twitched, her lips pressed into a line. I set the soup on the bedside table, lifted the lid, steam and savory fragrance rose. "Leah," she said, her voice weak, stripped of all sharp edges. "Mom," I replied. The name felt strange to my own ears. I had called her that for 5 years, always with a tangled knot of respect, distance, grievance, forbearance. But this time, the weight was lighter, like a stone that had pressed so long finally shifted half an inch, still there, but less crushing. Evelyn looked at the soup for a long moment. "Anya," she began, the words catching. "How is she these days?" "She's well," I said. "Today she got a little award in arts and crafts. She made a little house from cardboard, with a slanted roof and windows covered with tin foil. Ethan helped with the nails." Evelyn didn't respond. Her gaze fell to the embroidered pattern on the duvet, her fingers absently pleating the edge. After a long silence, she said something so soft I almost missed it. That child does look a little like Thomas." My heart lurched. I looked at her face, at the lines etched by years and stubbornness, and for the first time, I felt neither anger nor satisfaction. She still called Anya, that child, but this time, when she said, "looks a little like Thomas," something in her jaw, that line that had been held rigid for a lifetime, seemed to loosen a fraction. I didn't press. I just pushed the soup a little closer and said, "Drink it while it's hot," then left. As the door closed, I heard a soft cough, then the gentle chime of a spoon against the bowl. She didn't pour it out. No one else knew about it. I didn't tell a soul. Anya had no idea I'd delivered the soup. When I came home, she hugged me and said, "Mommy, you smell good today." Life resumed, but at an odd pace. Relatives began calling, texting, even visiting, not in anger, but with little gifts, fruit baskets, chocolates, a new dress for Anya. They'd sit in our living room, sipping tea, their eyes drifting to Anya with awkward, careful glances, as if meeting someone they thought they knew but now had to reacquaint themselves with. Anya handled it with remarkable poise. She accepted the gifts with, "Thank you," and sat quietly, neither shying away nor performing. Her amber eyes observed, her mind worked like a fine scanner, quietly sorting who was seeing her, and who was seeing the girl discovered to have Carter blood. At 9, she was sharper than most adults. Late one night, I mentioned this to Ethan. He listened in silence, rinsed Anya's milk glass in the sink, then turned to me, "Leah, have you noticed? Since that night, Anya's voice has gotten louder." I paused. He was right. Before, she'd always spoken softly, as if afraid to make noise, to attract attention. But lately, she called, "Daddy," "Mommy," with more volume, sometimes with the unself-conscious assertiveness of a kid her age. When she brought home that arts award and stuck it crookedly on the fridge, she tugged it off and repositioned it, grumbling, "This time it'll be straight," in a tone we hadn't heard in years. She was changing. The ice was melting. But not all cracks brought warmth, some led to colder, deeper waters. The following Saturday afternoon, Ethan's cousin Kate arrived. 6 years older than Ethan, she was one of Evelyn's most trusted confidants, long involved in managing family relations. She strode in, her coat still carrying the cold outside, heels clicking across the entryway. She came straight to the living room, no pleasantries, no fruit basket, carrying a tablet displaying a screenshot of the Carter family group chat. "Ethan," she said, setting the tablet on the coffee table, "you need to see this." The screen showed a wall of messages, relatives exchanging heated opinions after the dinner. Some shocked, some skeptical, some defensive of Evelyn, others passive-aggressive. At the center, a message from Andrew's wife, all caps, 5 exclamation points. Has everyone forgotten Thomas's record? Economic fraud. Now we're claiming his offspring. What about the family's reputation? Below, an echo. Ethan was too impulsive. He could have handled it behind closed doors. Another, that little girl, Anya, her mother Leah, did she really not know? Or was she pretending? Kate's own final comment, everyone stop. I'll talk to Ethan on Saturday. Ethan finished reading, and calmly slid the tablet back. Kate, what do you want to say? Kate crossed her hands on her knees, her posture straight, lips tight. Ethan, I'm not here to defend Mom. What you dropped at the dinner, I won't judge that now. But there's something you need to know. When you accessed those state hospital records to check on Thomas, you may have stirred up more than you intended. Ethan's brow furrowed almost imperceptibly. Kate leaned forward, lowering her voice. Thomas's case back then involved more than just himself. Did you look at the supplementary materials in that file? During his time in the hospital, he was involved in some testimony regarding state health department outsourcing contracts. Some of the people mentioned in those testimonies are still sitting on the White Pine Business Council. Your search could have flagged them. The room was quiet for a moment. Ethan tapped his fingers slowly on his knee, a thinking habit. Kate, he said, I searched DNA samples and medical records, not case files. You searched Thomas Carter's name, Kate said. The moment you entered it, the system linked you not just to medical records. That name has cross-references, notations, associations. You may think you only retrieved a paternity test, but you left a digital trail, who looked up what, and when. Ethan stopped tapping. Are you worried for me? He asked. Kate gave a brief, wry smile. I'm worried for this family. Mom has spent her life guarding those lines on the family tree, thinking that kept everything respectable. But you've turned over the soil, and some roots are good, but some are rotten. Rotten roots spread through the soil. She put the tablet back in her bag, stood, and adjusted her coat collar. I came to say one thing, you lifted the lid, so be ready for whatever crawls out. That's all. At the door, she paused, her tone softening. That little girl Anya. I saw her that night, alone, watching the other children open gifts, and she didn't cry. She's tough. Like our blood. And with that, she was gone. I sat on the sofa, fingers cold. Ethan came over, sat beside me, and put his arm around my shoulders. Scared? He asked, with a hint of irony. A little, I admitted, but mostly, tired. Every time we lift one layer, there's another underneath. Like it never ends. Ethan said nothing, just held me tighter. The family tree still hung over the fireplace, Evelyn hadn't taken it down. Thomas's blacked-out branch remained black, but beneath it, the empty spot, the place for the next generation, seemed to glow faintly in the firelight, like gold thread catching a stray gleam. Anya clattered down the stairs, clutching her cardboard house. Daddy. Mummy. Tomorrow I have to present this in class, help me think of what to say. The house was sturdy, the roof slanted, windows covered in bright tinfoil squares, the door cut from corrugated cardboard with a tiny cat drawn on it. Ethan examined it, nodding. Good roof angle, about 50 degrees. Did you make furniture inside? I made a little table and chairs. She turned to dash back upstairs, then stopped. Mom, Dad, should I wear my strawberry sweater tomorrow? Ethan and I exchanged a glance. The heavy weight of Kate's warning dissolved for an instant in the crooked little house and the girl's eager voice. Yes, he said. Strawberry sweater will go perfectly with this red roof. Anya bounded back upstairs. I leaned against Ethan, watching her disappear around the corner, my heart churning with fear, exhaustion, hope, and a deep resolve. Kate was right, the lid was off, and we didn't know what lay beneath. But we had lifted it together, for the sake of the child who once stood empty-handed in the corner. Whatever would crawl through those cracks, I would never let her stand alone in the shadows again. At least she had a roof, even if it was just corrugated cardboard. Monday morning, as I dropped Anya at school, a dark blue sedan I'd never seen before was parked across the street. Its windows were deeply tinted, the engine idled, exhaust pluming white in the cold air. I held Anya's hand as we passed, catching a glimpse of the license plate, Minnesota local, with the prefix used for government fleet vehicles. My stomach tightened. But I didn't stop. Anya chattered happily about her presentation, and when her strawberry sweater's collar twisted, I knelt to fix it. She lowered her head to help, her lashes casting small fans in the morning light. "Mom," she said suddenly, after I finished. "Yes. Grandma Evelyn called me yesterday." My hands stilled. Anya looked at me with that calm, matter-of-fact expression, different from the frozen calm of last year in the car. That calm had hidden permafrost, this one lay atop thawing ground. "What did she say?" I asked. Anya tilted her head. "She said she wanted me to come for tea next weekend. She said she baked cookies and asked if I liked cranberry ones." My heart raced, but I didn't ask, "What did you say?" I wanted to hear from her. Anya rubbed her sleeve, then looked up, her amber eyes holding a soft but solid light. "I said I love cranberry ones." "Mom, can I go?" I knelt there in the cold morning air, smoothed the last wrinkle from her collar, and answered seriously, "If you want to go, go. If at any time you don't want to stay, call me, and I'll come get you." "Anytime." Anya nodded, turned, and ran into the school, her strawberry red sweater bright under the grey winter sky. She glanced back once and waved. I waved back until she was gone, then walked to my car. The blue sedan had silently driven off, only 2 tire tracks remained, quickly erased by the wind. I got in, my palms clammy. I gripped the wheel, staring out at the quiet main street of white pine, bare winter branches pointing to the grey sky, a few pigeons huddled on wires. Everything looked normal. But I knew it wasn't. The investigation wouldn't fade quietly. Kate's people still on the council would eventually find us. Thomas's old case was like a stone stirred at the bottom of a pond, mud swirled, hidden currents would surface. Yet, as I turned the key, a clear thought rose: whatever came, it couldn't be colder than that Christmas night. Then, my daughter stood under the bright tree with nothing in her hands and loneliness in her eyes. Now she ran into school in her strawberry sweater, carrying her cardboard house in her backpack, knowing she'd be picked up, knowing her award was on the fridge, knowing her father had said in front of everyone, "She is my daughter." That was worth it. In the afternoon, I went to the White Pine Public Library. I sat by the window, looking at a faded copy of a timeline sheet from the hospital's archives that Ethan had photocopied. Thomas Carter's name appeared once, with a handwritten note: "This patient participated in a state health department outsourced project interview, record stored in State Archive Hall, Cabinet D7. D7. I saved that number on my phone and closed the folder. Just then, my phone buzzed, a text from Ethan: "Mom just called me. She wants to see you." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Sunlight slanted through the library window across the wooden table, its grain forming concentric circles like spread time. I typed back, "When?" Ethan's reply came instantly: "Tonight. She's coming to our house." I turned my phone face down on the table, leaned back, and closed my eyes. The library was quiet, distant pages turning, heaters humming. In my mind, I saw Evelyn propped against her pillows, pale and spent. She'd said, "That child does look a little like Thomas, like a grain of sand, small but abrasive." She was coming here. A woman who had ruled from her own living room for decades now chose to come to the house she'd ignored for 5 years. That alone said a lot. I gathered my things, stepped out into the cold wind, and walked home. I passed a bakery with a tray of fresh cranberry cookies in the window, golden, studded with dark fruit, rich with butter. I stood for 2 seconds, then walked in and bought 2 dozen. Anya loved cranberry. If Evelyn was coming, there would be cookies on the coffee table. Not a peace offering, not an apology, just a treat that this house's most legitimate little resident enjoyed. I carried the bag home. The kitchen smelled of simmering apples. Ethan had mulled cider on the stove. He poked his head out, spatula in hand, apron askew. When he saw the cookies, he grinned, tired, but warm. Anxious, he asked. A little, I confessed, but not as much as I'd expect. Good. He stirred the pot. Anya's upstairs doing her homework. I told her Grandma was coming. She said okay, and went back to writing her characters. She's steadier than both of us. I laughed, leaning against the counter, watching fog form on the window. Outside, streetlights began to glow, turning the wet road orange. In 40 minutes, Evelyn's car would pull up, and she'd cross the threshold, sit on our couch, with our cookies and our cider. I didn't know what she'd say or how I'd respond. But I knew I was no longer the Leah who swallowed her pain alone. The dinner under the tree had changed everything, not least of which was my fear of overturning tables. Footsteps pounded down the stairs. Mom. Dad. I finished my writing. Can I have a cookie? Wash your hands first. Ethan called. I did. Clean. Then give one to Mommy first, then take one for yourself. Anya ran in, offered me a cookie, and I bit into it, sweet tart cranberry, buttery warmth to the core. She stuffed one into her own mouth, cheeks puffing like a chipmunk. Mom, when Grandma comes, can I show her my house again? Of course. I need to re-glue the roof, then. She ran back to the living room, scattering crumbs. I looked at the mess, at Ethan in the kitchen, at the lit street outside, a picture of ordinary, messy, trivial life. But in it, I saw a home that was finally breathing. At 7 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. Ethan dried his hands and went to the door. I followed, standing a half step behind. Anya peeked out from the living room, glue still on her fingers, curious. Ethan opened the door. Evelyn stood under the porch light in a burgundy wool coat, her hair combed neatly, a white box in her hands. She looked better than she had in bed, but the lines around her eyes and mouth were deeper, like a tree long buffeted by wind, its trunk still there, but its branches had turned several directions. She looked at the three of us, Ethan, me, and Anya peeking from the living room. Her lips parted. After a long silence, she held out the box. Cranberry cookies, she said, her voice rough. Baked them myself. Anya ran to the door, looked at the box, then at Evelyn, and took it with her still sticky fingers. Thank you, Grandma, she said, clear and steady. Evelyn's lips trembled. She stood under the light, looking at the child holding her homemade cookies, and the rigid line she had held for so long loosened just a little more. You're welcome, she said, her voice like sandpaper on old wood. Eat them while they're warm, they won't be crisp once cold. Ethan stepped aside. Mom, come in. The cider's ready. Evelyn stepped over the threshold. The door closed behind her, shutting out the December cold. Warm light enveloped 4 figures, on the coffee table. 2 plates of cookies sat side by side, one store-bought, one homemade, with slightly burnt edges. But both were sweet. What they talked about that evening isn't the point. What mattered was Anya sitting on the little stool, showing off her cardboard house, pointing to each room and saying, "This is the living room, this is the kitchen, this is my bedroom, and this little window lets me see the moon." Evelyn sat on the couch, bent forward, her gaze on the crooked roof, her finger lightly touching the tinfoil window, her silence long. Later, Anya grew sleepy. Ethan carried her upstairs. The living room was left with just me and Evelyn. The cider was nearly gone. Outside, streetlights swung their shadows across the curtains. After a long silence, Evelyn spoke softly. "Leah, that house, the roof is slanted, did you notice? Anya made it that way on purpose, so rain would run off." Evelyn was quiet again. She picked up the cardboard house and placed it carefully on her knee, stroking the corrugated door frame as if afraid to break it. After a while, she murmured something almost inaudible, but I caught it. "Thomas used to make houses like that. With matchboxes." The roof was slanted too. I sat across from her, watching her face in the soft light. The lines carved by years and stubbornness seemed gentler. I didn't say anything. I knew she wasn't talking to me. She was speaking to a 9-year-old's cardboard house, to something in herself that was slowly, quietly coming undone. When Evelyn left, it was nearly 10. Ethan walked her to the door. She stood under the porch, looked back at the living room window. Anya's light was off. Only the downstairs glow remained. She smoothed her coat collar, said something to Ethan, then got in her car. Ethan came back in. I was putting the leftover cookies into a tin. He came up behind me, wrapped his arms around my waist, and rested his chin on my shoulder. "What did she say at the door?" I asked. Ethan was quiet for a second, then said softly, "She said, it's better that the window paper was torn. All these years, I was fooling myself too." My hand paused, the tin's rim pressing against my palm. Out the window, the car's taillights grew smaller, turned a corner, and disappeared. The night went silent again, save for the heater's low hum. I closed the cookie tin, placed it in the cupboard, turned off the living room light, and followed Ethan upstairs. On the landing, Anya's drawing scraps lay scattered. I picked up a few larger pieces while Ethan held his phone light. We said nothing, but the silence was different, no burden in it, just a flat, open quiet, like snow falling on a winter night. Anya's door was ajar, a sliver of warm nightlight leaked out. I pushed it gently open to see her curled under the blanket, her face half hidden, the cardboard house on her pillow, roof slanted, tinfoil windows catching the warm glow like a tiny star. I pulled the door closed. At the end of the hall, the window showed the quiet winter night of white pine. Tomorrow, Anya would present her little house in her strawberry sweater, Ethan would fix furnaces, I would grade a pile of essays. Life would go on, with new troubles, new twists, new moments. But the shadow under that Christmas tree, my daughter would never stand alone in it again. At least in this home, no one would ever let her wait empty-handed. Here is the English translation of the continuation. After that night, winter in White Pine truly deepened. Temperatures plunged to well below zero. Every morning, thick frost coated the car windows, and Anya would breathe a puff of warm air onto the glass and draw a crooked star with her finger before she could see the street outside. Our old boiler, after running nonstop for 3 days, finally let out a mournful groan and quit altogether. Ethan spent an entire afternoon crouched in the utility closet, and when he poked his head out with a smudge of oil across his forehead, his expression was a mix of resignation and amusement. Need to replace a part. I'll make do with space heaters for a couple of days. Anya was delighted by this development, since the space heater could be moved anywhere. She dragged the little yellow heater over to the living room coffee table and placed her cardboard house in front of it, announcing she was heating the house. Ethan crouched beside her, adjusting the angle, and the two of them put their heads together, murmuring about whether the warm air would blow the tinfoil windows off. I stood in the kitchen making noodles, watching them through the doorway, and for a moment I felt as if I'd been transported back 5 years, to the first time he'd come over and built a castle with her on this very floor, except Anya was taller now, her hair longer, and her voice, once baby-soft, had turned crisp with a little grown-up edge. But unlike 5 years ago, this door no longer held just the three of us. Wednesday afternoon, Anya came home from school with a small brown paper bag in her backpack. As she changed out of her shoes, she handed it to me, lightweight, its flap sealed with a strip of pale blue tape. "Mom, Grandma Evelyn asked me to give this to you." I opened the bag and found a folded card inside. On the cover was a hand-drawn sprig of holly, the leaves carefully shaded in layers of deep and light green, the berries dotted with bright red. I opened it. The handwriting inside was unsteady, the strokes faintly trembling, as if the hand holding the pencil had hesitated. "Leah, this Saturday at 3 p.m, if it's convenient, I'd like to invite Anya over for tea. I've baked a fresh batch of cranberry cookies with walnuts. If you'd like, you're welcome to join as well. I'll set out an extra seat. Evelyn." I read the card twice. Anya had already clattered upstairs to change into her house clothes, and Ethan poked his head out from the kitchen, still holding a wrench. "What is it?" I walked over and handed him the card. He read it, his eyebrows lifting slightly, then settling back down. He handed it back to me without immediate comment, just said, "You can go if you want. Do you think I should?" He thought for a moment, set the wrench down on the counter, and leaned over to brush the back of his oil-stained hand against mine, the cool metal smell mingling with his warmth. "I think," he said, with handwriting that slow and leaves colored in so many layers, "she must have spent at least 20 minutes on that card. A woman who's spent her whole life on a family tree, taking 20 minutes to write one card to someone." He paused. "She's really trying." I looked down at the holly sprig, my fingertip tracing the layers of green pencil strokes. Yes, she was trying. And all I could do was meet that effort with equal sincerity. Saturday at 2:50, Anya and I stood on the porch of Evelyn's grey stone house. Anya wore her strawberry sweater under a thick puffy coat, a light grey scarf I'd knitted wrapped around her neck, its ends ending in 2 fluffy pom-poms. She held my hand with one of hers and a small cloth bag with the other. Her cardboard house was tucked inside. "I want to show Grandma how I reinforced the roof," she told me seriously before we left. Last time she looked at it, her voice went soft. I rang the bell. Footsteps sounded from inside, a half-beat slower than before, the soft shuffle of slippers across wood. The door opened, and Evelyn stood before us in a dark green wool cardigan, her hair pinned up, a simple pearl clip at her temple. She looked more relaxed than the last time she'd come to our house. The lines around her eyes were still there, but the expression was no longer the defensive, braced-for-impact look she'd worn before. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. Her gaze landed on Anya for a moment, then lifted to me, her mouth twitching as if she wasn't quite sure which shape a smile should take. "It's cold out." The living room hadn't changed much. The fire crackled in the hearth, the family tree still hung in its usual place. But something was different. The coffee table was covered with a fresh cream-colored cloth, set with 3 porcelain plates, 2 piled with cookies, 1 empty, and a pot of steaming fruit tea with coasters neatly arranged. Beside the fireplace, a small stool had been added, topped with a fluffy yellow cushion, the same kind Anya loved to hug at home while warming her hands by the space heater. I pretended not to notice the little stool that had been deliberately placed, but Anya's eyes lit up. She let go of my hand, walked over, and touched the cushion, then looked up at Evelyn. "Grandma, this cushion is so soft. I bought it on purpose." Evelyn's voice was a little awkward as she lifted the teapot to pour. Her focus was so intent that her hand trembled slightly, and a few drops splashed onto the tablecloth. She quickly wiped them away with her thumb. I pretended to study the picture frames on the mantel, giving her space to collect herself. Anya sat down, placed the cloth bag on her lap, patted it, then solemnly withdrew her cardboard house. She set it squarely in the center of the coffee table and pointed at the new reinforcing strips along the roof for Evelyn to see. Daddy glued 3 of these for me with his glue gun. He said even if a little snow piles up, it won't collapse. Grandma, look, I also added this little chimney next to the window. It's made from a straw. Evelyn bent down, leaning close to examine the straw chimney. The firelight from the hearth fell across her face, catching the pearl clip with a soft gleam. She reached out and touched the edge of the straw with her fingertip, so gently, as if handling something fragile and precious. The curve of the chimney, she said slowly, when you cut it, did you draw the line first? Yes. First I drew a half circle on the straw with a pencil, then I cut it slowly with little scissors. It took forever. Anya gestured excitedly. Mom held the straw steady while I cut. The edge was a little fuzzy, so Daddy used a lighter to smooth it, but he wouldn't let me do it myself, he did it for me. I smelled a little bit of burnt. The burnt part Evelyn picked up, is it now a light brown, hard, like a chimney stained by smoke? Anya froze, looked down at the small scorch mark at the top of the chimney, and looked back up with wide eyes. Grandma, how did you know? Evelyn didn't answer right away. Her hand still hovered above the cardboard house, her fingertip barely a hair's breadth from the straw chimney. After several seconds, she spoke, her voice very soft. Your great-grandfather, when he did woodworking, he used to use a lighter to smooth rough edges too. He called it singeing the edge. He said wood and paper, once singed, they wouldn't fray anymore. Anya tilted her head, turning the words over in her mind with the careful deliberation of a child weighing something important. Then she nodded. Great-grandpa was so clever. Evelyn's eyes reddened suddenly, just for an instant, then faded. She straightened, lifted her teacup, and took a sip, letting the rising steam veil that fleeting moment. I sat on the other side of the sofa, holding a warm cup of fruit tea, saying nothing. Some moments don't need words, they just need someone to be present, to witness them as they unfold. That afternoon tea lasted nearly 2 hours. Anya went through every detail of her cardboard house, the layout of the furniture, the pattern of the curtains, why the roof was slanted, what color she'd painted the chimney to make it look most like real smoke. Evelyn listened with great attention, occasionally interjecting a question. What did you use to measure the width of the doorframe? How long did the glue take to dry? Practical, concrete questions. Anya answered with such enthusiasm that she gestured wildly, bouncing in her seat, and in her excitement, she managed to knock off one of the 2 pom-poms on her scarf. Evelyn bent down, picked it up, held it in her palm for a moment, and said, I'll sew it back on for you. Tight stitches, so it won't come loose again. Anya said, thank you, Grandma, her tone as ordinary and natural as if she'd said it 1,000 times before. On the way home, Anya sat in the back seat, leaning against the window, her cardboard house on her lap. The scarf was missing one pom-pom, left behind with Evelyn to be mended. The car was quiet, warm air blowing from the vents. Anya watched the streetlights slide past one by one, then suddenly spoke, Mom. Yes. When Grandma said, singeing the edge, today, her eyes got a little red. I held the steering wheel, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. Her expression was calm, like she was reporting an observation, not carrying any sadness or confusion, just stating what she'd seen. Yes, I noticed. What does that mean? Anya asked. Was she sad, or happy? I thought for a moment. In the mirror, Anya's eyes reflected the warm glow of the streetlights receding behind us, bright and clear. Probably both, I said. Sometimes when very old memories suddenly come back to you, it's like that, sadness and happiness get mixed together and you can't separate them. Anya was quiet for a few seconds, then let out a soft as if filing that explanation away in some drawer in her mind. She hugged the cardboard house to her chest, turned her face to the window, and looked out at the night for a while. Her voice was drowsy when she murmured, then next time I'll show her something new. I smiled, but didn't reply. The car rolled through White Pine's main street. The bakery's sign glowed warm in the night, and the window display had been redecorated after Christmas, a few porcelain snowmen wearing crooked scarves. And beside them, a small plastic tree still strung with tiny lights, yet to be taken down. The traces of the holiday lingered, but they were slowly being overtaken by the rhythm of everyday life.